Today we're talking about my must-own wide receivers for 2020, coming right up. What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 18th, 2020, and of course, I am Chip. I'm your host, and thank you so much for listening. And if you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us today as well. Please share this podcast. You can find this podcast on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and you can also watch us on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So please do us a favor, hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And today's Tuesday, so I hope everyone had a good weekend. I hope everybody was able to listen to the podcast that I dropped on Friday and Saturday. On Friday, I dropped my must tight ends, and then on Sunday, I dropped my two quarterback format PPR 10-team league mock draft. So I hope that you're able to watch that or listen to that podcast just to kind of keep things aware of like different strategies and different leagues that you may be in. But this weekend in Seattle was a hot one. It was nice to be able to actually feel the heat. I'm from Florida, so I moved to Western Washington about 2 years ago, and it's hard to get used to the 9 months of rain and cold and cloudiness and just the gray. It's just really hard to adapt. So it was nice to actually feel 95-degree weather. The weather here mostly is good from about July 4th to like maybe sometimes before Halloween, but it's just nice to be able to have that sunshine without any rain. It hasn't rained in quite some time, probably a few weeks, and it's just nice to be able to just have sunshine throughout the summer months. So it's been super nice. But it was one of those things where I took my daughter out. We went down to the waterfront. We got some ice cream, went on a bike ride, all that stuff. So it was just nice to be able to kind of feel like it was summertime, finally in August. But let's get into the news. Let's see. Chris Carson returned to Seattle Seahawks practice on Sunday after dealing with the family issue. The reports indicate that he's on track to start week one. I tend to still be skeptical of that because they did have to sign Carlos Hyde, and mostly could be just for Rashad Penny. But I do think that we have to pay attention to practice reports and see how much reps Carson is getting, because he is coming off a hip injury. So I hope that that's nothing too serious that will make him miss any time. But hopefully his family's doing well, and now he's back. So obviously that seems to be the case. This is another thing. Adam Gase made it clear that Chris Herndon was the starting tight end for the New York Jets. I really don't know why he had to make that clear. I mean, he is obviously a starting tight end. He is one of Sam Darnold's main targets. So it's pretty obvious that he was going to be the starter and be one of the top producers in that offense behind Jameson Crowder, and then you got Le'Veon Bell as well. But it was just weird that Adam Gase came out to say that. And then in Lions practice, Kerryon Johnson was spotted at Lions practice with a knee brace. This isn't unheard of. He's coming off a knee injury. We see this all the time where we see quarterbacks wearing knee braces. We see players coming back from injury wearing knee braces. I mean, it's just a way to protect the knee and whatnot. So nothing to be concerned about, at least in my eyes. But this is still indication that I still will draft DeAndre Swift before Kerryon Johnson. I think DeAndre Swift has a better chance of getting most of the snaps. And if there's any reason that Kerryon Johnson's not, recovering from his injury like everyone has hoped, it just makes it clear that DeAndre Swift is the guy to draft. So that's who I'm going to be drafting over Kerryon Johnson in my own drafts. I think you guys would as well. So it's one of those things that just continue to monitor throughout the next coming weeks. This is a great story. Alex Smith was officially activated off the PUP list on Sunday. I mean, this is a huge comeback for such a gruesome and horrific injury. I mean, honestly, I am rooting for him. I am not sure how he's going to function on the football field. That's yet to be determined. There was a video that got released on Sunday by his wife that he was walking out of the house and they were celebrating him with, it looked like they were spraying with, it looked like champagne or whatever they were, spraying him with. And, the first thing that I noticed, and it was very significant, at least for me, was that he had foot drop on his right foot. So if no one doesn't know what that is, obviously he dealt with 17 surgeries. There was nerve damage. There was, obviously muscle issues there with his leg as well. To me, he's definitely still showing a lot of weakness. Obviously, the nerve damage really takes a long time to recover. Generally, when you have foot drop, it's not likely that he will recover full function of his foot and ankle. What he cannot do, it looks like he just can't clear the floor with his foot, meaning that he can't flex his ankle enough to actually clear it. So, like I said, I don't know what he's going to be like at full speed when it comes to functional like football activities. My guess is that he will have to wear an AFO, which is a ankle foot orthotic, which is something that we've seen certain players like back in the past, like Dan Marino, some other players that had dealt with some type of ankle foot injury that had to wear this brace in order to help kind of clear their foot off the ground. Alex Smith is a guy that is, a mobile quarterback. I don't see that being the case as much anymore. I do feel like it's a great comeback story. I mean, he had worked his ass off and has done a hell of a job to get himself back to where he is, and I'm just rooting for him, so I hope that I'm wrong, but I do think that he's going to be limited. And the only reason why I'm able to speak of this, because if you're a new listener, you're wondering why I'm going so much depth about Alex with his injuries, that I've practiced physical therapy for 13 years, and I've worked with NFL athletes. I've seen these injuries throughout my career, and for the regular civilian, in a sense, like the regular patient, they're going to have limitations. So Alex Smith is human like anybody else, but he's just an elite athlete with the best, doctors and the best, trainers and everything out there. And I know that he will beat this, but I just don't know to what degree that he's going to be on the football field. So hopefully he's a guy that just continues to have a feel-good story and gets back on the football field and is able to actually have a longer career. But obviously his health is the main thing. I hope that he's not putting himself in extra danger for trying to come back and play, and that something else happens. So hopefully that the Washington football team and Alex Smith and the doctors and the trainers wouldn't have take him off the PUP if they didn't feel confident about what he does on the football field. But just watching the video of him walking out of his home, it just felt like there wasn't a lot of confidence in that foot and leg, and it just hopefully comes in time. But it's a thing that you just hope to root for the guy, but I don't know exactly how that translates to being on the football field and being a starter again. But in news on Monday, this is a sad story too, because Gerald McCoy of the Dallas Cowboys, he's defensive tackle, he tears his quad tendon during some random one-on-one drill that I watched the video earlier yesterday, and when I saw the video, he was just literally doing a one-on-one drill. The guy pushed him, he fell backward, and he tore his quad tendon. So, if you guys don't know what the quad tendon is, it's the tendon that goes from your main quad muscle to their kneecap, and obviously it's just anything else. I mean, it's a year-long recovery. He's not going to be out. He's not going to play until next year. Those used to be career-ending injuries. Now they tend to be just like 9 to 12 months based on how severe it is, how his rehab goes, how the surgery goes. But the fact of the matter is that Gerald McCoy. I've met Gerald McCoy about 3 times when he was on the Bucs, and by far one of my favorite and one of the nicest players I've ever met. I met him in different occasions. And actually, one of the coolest stories was that I was able to watch the Avengers with them. So in Tampa, he had rented out, when the Avengers first came out years ago, he rented out a whole movie theater for Bucs fans. And obviously, it was like a raffle, and you had to win and all that. So I was there with multiple Bucs fans. But it was cool to be able to watch, the movie with Gerald McCoy, and at the time, Adrian Claiborne was on the Bucs as well, and a couple other guys. I can't remember who was there, but that's the type of guy he is. It was just a nice guy that every time I came in contact with him during I was a season ticket holder for the Bucs, and seeing him in, that capacity of just being a big component of like just the fans and appreciating the fans and all that stuff, it was a really cool thing. So it's sad to see that he got injured and that he's not going to play this year, because he's such a good guy, and I just hope that he has a great recovery and that he comes back strong next year. And then the Ravens are expected to host Dez Bryant for a visit. I don't really know exactly what his role will be, but obviously he was 31 years old now. He will be a red zone target and red zone threat because of his size, but I don't know. He looked good in video when he was practicing with Patrick Mahomes during the offseason, so I'm sure he has a lot in the tank. I'm not going to ever discount any of that. I mean, Terrell Owens at 40-something years old still ran and gave Tyreek Hill, a good race. Like, even though Tyreek Hill blew him away, I mean, Owens is able to still run like a 4.3, 4.4 40, which is crazy. So I'm sure if Des Bryant's working his ass off, he's going to play well and whatnot and practice and, hopefully do something for the Ravens that's going to be something that will definitely help them, long-term in the passing game. But lastly, the reports out of Cleveland, have indicated that they decided that now this is all talk. We don't know exactly how much this is actually true, but Cleveland reports that giving Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt 15 carries apiece will give them the best chance for offensive success. I mean, overall, this makes good for football sense, right? So if you're a Cleveland Browns fan and whatnot, this makes sense for football sense because overall, like, Stefanski ran the ball 55% of the time when he was with the Minnesota Vikings. So we know that he runs a run-heavy offense. But in fantasy, this really hurts Nick Chubb. I mean, if this is true, we all kind of were unsure of like how Kareem Hunt will eat into Nick Chubb's fantasy value. Now, there's some reports saying that they are okay giving both running backs 15 carries per game. I don't know, man. That makes me concerned because Nick Chubb is being drafted pretty high. He's in some of the drafts I'm doing, he's going in the first round. And that gets me kind of concerned for what's really going on with that offense and how they plan on using both those running backs. So I think us as fantasy analysts and also trying to make sure that the fantasy players, are aware of this is that, we can't overlook Kareem Hunt. We keep on wanting to think Nick Chubb is the workhorse running back, but Kareem Hunt is a very talented player, and with it being a more natural pass catcher, I mean, Kareem Hunt definitely has a chance to eat into some of Nick Chubb's, playing time and whatnot. And he's just a dual threat running back that's a very good running back. So something to monitor. I mean, we're not going to know exactly how they're going to play because we're not watching any games right now. And usually in the preseason, they weren't going to do anything that's going to show us how many carries we're going to get anyways. But it's something to continue to monitor. I mean, I'm going to avoid Nick Chubb if I have to because I don't want to have a running back that I spend first round value on, and then I get like RB2 numbers because Kareem Hunt is there getting, the same or even more carries. So something to really pay attention to. But today we are now going into my must-own wide receivers for 2020. Now this pick, like I said, usually in all these videos, I always have to make sure I indicate that these are not going to be players that are given choices, right? So I'm not going to say Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams. I'm not going to say Tyreek Hill because we all know these guys are must-own wide receivers. I'm trying to pick players that are, maybe fringe wide receiver ones to, mid-round guys that I think that have a chance to break out this year, but also, give you some value and upside in, on your roster this year. So, okay, so let's get into the list of players that I have for your must-have wide receivers for 2020. So my very first wide receiver that I have is Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson last year was the wide receiver 7. Right now, his consensus ranking is at 7. So, that's where he ended last year. That's where he's being ranked at right now. Last year, he had 98 receptions on 153 targets, which was second in the league. And then he had 1,147 yards with 7 touchdowns. Now, he had a monster season. I mean, that is by far a guy that you want to try to get. That's very good. If you draft him last year late, I mean, that was great value, right? So, but he played 41% of the snaps from the slot with 4 touchdowns. And also he was the top red zone target and the top end zone target for the Bears. So the reason why I like him so much is because the offense is revolving around Robinson. I mean, it's indicated and obvious by the 158 targets. I get it. He plays with the team, like he plays with the Bears, and the quarterback situation is really unknown, kind of unreliable. We don't really know about who's going to start, if it's Mitch Trubisky or if it's Nick Foles. But even with Mitch Trubisky at the starting quarterback, and this is not Trubisky, I don't knock any NFL player, but I do think that I mean, with Trubisky at quarterback, I mean, the guy had still 158 targets and produced a season like that, which, I mean, that's if he had any other quarterback, I would say if he had, obviously Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, I mean, I just wonder how his numbers would be with that, or even Matt Ryan. But it's one of those things where it's still to be determined, because we could all agree that Foles could be an upgrade over Trubisky. But the thing is that Nick Foles is known to throw more to the tight end and the running back, so that's kind of concerning. But it's one of those things where Allen Robinson still should, I hate to use this term, but he should eat next year. I mean, he should still have the targets. I know that they brought in Jimmy Graham, so obviously there could be more targets that go to the tight end position. But I do think that the offense is revolving around Allen Robinson. So the thing is, when you're only as good as your supporting cast, right? So when Anthony Miller, coming on after like week 11, we saw that Robinson was a wide receiver 4. So we know that Anthony Miller plays a role in Allen Robinson's success. So obviously that benefits Robinson. And with Anthony Miller emerging late last season, we hope that Anthony Miller actually takes the next step as a wide receiver in the Bears offense. So with that being the case, that should only help Robinson. But honestly, I think that if from a draft strategy standpoint, if you're doing a wide receiver or a running back heavy draft and you're trying to get all the best running backs you can, I mean, Allen Robinson, I feel like, will be there to grab a little bit later, because people, for some reason, they're just not valuing him as much. And it's crazy because I know that he's ranked 7, right? So we all can agree that he's being ranked that high, but I don't know how fancy players will look at that when Allen Robinson's on the board. Like, if you had a choice between Allen Robinson and Amari Cooper, who are you going to pick, right? And, obviously, it seems like the consensus will be leaning towards Amari Cooper because, he's on the better offense, which I would differ that I think there's too much going on in Dallas with Amari Cooper and with CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup and, and Elliott, where I just feel like you're going to get probably obviously more value, more targets in the Bears offense, because after Allen Robinson, I mean, he's obviously the number 1 target, and then possibly a Jimmy Graham. Anthony Miller will get his, but I don't think it's going to really dip into Allen Robinson's targets. So I think that this is a perfect guy to get if you're doing like a running back heavy type of strategy. Now, my second wide receiver, I love this dude this year. It's Terry McLaurin. Right now, he's being ranked at the 22nd position based on the consensus rankings. And last year, he ended the season at the wide receiver 29. His stats last year, he had 58 receptions on 91 targets for 919 yards and 7 touchdowns. So, he led the team with 22% of the target share. He led the team in air yards, in red zone, and end zone targets. His average depth of target was 14 yards. So it's obvious this guy is a downfield threat. I mean, he did miss 2 games last year because of a hamstring injury, but it's one of those things where when he is playing, he's electric. I mean, last year he had 12 receptions for 20 yards or more. I mean, he's good against single coverage. This guy can play. And I think that with that being the case, it's good that he doesn't play much in the slot, so he's a perimeter receiver. But I have this, for some reason, I have this feeling that he is going to be Chris Godwin of this year. I think that we saw enough last year where we saw it like that with Chris Godwin. We knew like there was this breakout coming. And I think McLaurin has that this year. I think that he's a guy that you can get super late and could get really good value from. So I think it's a breakout season for him. I think the only thing that could hinder his growth in what he does this year in fantasy is the fact of the matter is that we don't know how Dwayne Haskins is going to be as a second year quarterback. We know that they had a connection at Ohio State, and things progressed a little bit at the end of last season, but we definitely have to see a drastic change in progression in Dwayne Haskins in order to see McLaurin, flourish. So I do know that obviously last year when Case Keenum was the quarterback, that's where McLaurin had his better games. So we'll see what happens. But now, like, we have Alex Smith now back in the running for maybe a potential starting position. You got Dwayne Haskins. I don't know. I think that that's something that you have to monitor in order to kind of see, where we're going to see the actual fantasy production coming from. But, I still, regardless of who's the quarterback, I still think McLaurin has a good season. So someone to target late in your draft, in the mid rounds. It's like I said, just like with Allen Robinson, if you're trying to go from a running back heavy strategy, I mean McLaurin should be there in the mid rounds. My next wide receiver on my list is DK Metcalf. Now last year he ended the season as the wide receiver 30. He is ranked right now just behind Terry McLaurin at 24. Now last year, just like Terry McLaurin, similar stats. He had 58 receptions on 97 targets and 900 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now he was second on the team in target share and air yards, just behind Tyler Lockett. Now this is where DK Metcalf could have been a monster last year. He had 30 red zone targets and an NFL leading 18 end zone targets. So he only had 7 touchdowns last year, but if like 18 end zone targets, like he is the guy in the end zone for the Seahawks. Now, if he had just converted 4 or 5 of those, end zone targets into touchdowns, we're probably talking about a whole different ranking for DK Metcalf. And I think that this year is the year that he just blows up. Last year we saw that he did come on and kind of slow. His route tree was only pretty much slant routes and 9 routes, and then he was only really lined up on the left side of the formation. And as the season progressed, as he got more acclimated to the offense, he was starting to line up on the right side. His route tree grew. And like I said, once he got acclimated to the offense, we saw him outperform Tyler Lockett from week 10 and beyond. And, he barely finished behind Tyler Lockett in targets and everything like that. So I think that, this is the year I feel this is where DK Metcalf takes that step forward. I mean, if he does anything that he does, during the season like he did against the Eagles, I mean, during the playoffs, he had a 7 reception, 160-yard gain and a touchdown. Now we know that the Eagles had a really bad pass defense last year, but I mean, if this is the type of games that he can put up, I mean, this dude's going to have a monster season. And honestly, like I said before, I'm not concerned about his target share. Yes, Tyler Lockett's there, and they added Greg Olsen. Will Dissly comes back, but I do think that the Seahawks are going to try to make this offense and try to just kind of form it around DK Metcalf. I mean, the dude is just a monster. I mean, the dude's like Batman. The super, him and AJ Brown are just beasts of wide receivers. And also too, there's some news that came out that asked Russell Wilson actually taught him how to swim this offseason. So I mean, if your quarterback for your team is teaching you how to swim, I mean, you can't get more of a bond with that than your quarterback teaching you how to swim. I mean, that's like, if he has the confidence that he can swim now and Russell Wilson gives him that confidence, how much more confidence can Russell Wilson have in DK Metcalf? I mean, that's going to be, I think that's what makes Metcalf blow up this year. I know that's, whatever, but look, like I said, this could be a hot take, but I think Metcalf is going to be a monster this year. I mean, the numbers are there, even with his rookie season. The numbers are there, and like I said, if he's able to convert those end zone targets, at least a few more, I mean, he's having a whole different season, this year. So I got one more guy on my list. And my last guy that's a must-own wide receiver is Marquise Brown. Now, last year, he ended the season as the wide receiver 46. Right now, he's being ranked at 32. Now, his stats last year were 46 receptions on 65 targets. He only had 584 yards, but he had 7 touchdowns. Just like DK Metcalf, he was second on the team in target share, air yards, red zone, and end zone targets, behind Mark Andrews. So he only played 37% of the snaps in the slot, but which resulted in 6 touchdowns. Now that tied for most in the league. So when he's in the slot, I mean, he did some damage in the slot. So he's a small, fast wide receiver, and I think that obviously shows. So now with that being said, he only played 58% of the offensive snaps, and he missed 2 games. So he was, they drafted him in the first round last year. He had a foot issue, and then he missed some time, but it's obviously after Mark Andrews, he was the next guy in line when it came to target share. But I do still think he will still be the number 2 target. I think he'll still be the number 2 in targets for the Baltimore Ravens. But I do think that, obviously, in my own mind, I think that the Ravens pass more. So I think this causes his ceiling to be a little higher. It's one of those things where I understand that the Ravens are a very run-heavy offense, but it doesn't mean that there's not going to be opportunity for Marquise Brown. Because I do really truly think, I do think Lamar Jackson is going to take a step forward in his passing, and then he's going to take a regression in his rushing. I think that we see a guy like Lamar Jackson who is a freak athlete who can destroy the defense from any which way. But I do think that the defenses are going to scheme more around Lamar Jackson's running ability, which is going to force him to pass. And because I think we all can see that happening, it's not going to stop Lamar Jackson. He's still going to be elite. He's still going to be able to get his rushing yards. But I don't think he's going to have the historic season like he did this year or last year. But I do think with the fact that they have to now, account for him in the running game, they put a QB spy on him, and then he passes more. And I think that opens up the offense a lot more, which will give more opportunities to Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews. And I think that that's going to help overall in the passing game. That's just my opinion. I just think that the opportunities will be there just because of maybe the shift they do in their offense. But, it's one of those things where with Marquise Brown, the reason why I like Marquise Brown so much this year is like he took his offseason seriously. I mean, he added 23 pounds of muscle. So obviously he's taken that, his job seriously. He wants to be that dude in Baltimore. And I think that he has every opportunity to be able to do that. So I think it's one of those things where he's not going to, I don't think he was going to end the season as a wide receiver 1. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying like he's a guy that you can grab. He could be your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 type guy, and with a lot of upside. So, that's my opinion on Marquise Brown. But I figured I had to mention him in my list because he's a guy that definitely needs to be on everybody's radar, just a sense of getting someone that's late in your draft. So, that's it. That's my list. I mean, I add, Allen Robinson, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, and Marquise Brown are my must-have wide receivers to own. And, if you have any other players that you want to mention, please leave a comment below and let's talk about it because, I go through the list and I kind of see what guys stick out the most. And for me, these 4 guys were sticking out the most to me on my list. So, there you have it. I mean, those are my 2020 must-own wide receivers. Let's discuss it if you want to discuss it. I'm all for talking to the community and anybody who listens to the podcast. But thank you so much for listening today. Please like, comment, and share. I know that gets kind of redundant, but it really means a lot for you guys to subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to my YouTube channel because it only helps us grow and be able to like finally build a community and everything like that. So. The next episode, I will be discussing, my caution players for 2020. I think we're going through the breakouts and the must-haves. There's also who should we avoid in the 2020 season. So that will be my next video coming up. That should come out Thursday or Friday of this week. So, like I said, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss that episode. And if you're looking for draft strategies and looking at different strategies for your leagues, and in essence, to get prepared for your drafts, I'm going to leave a card up in the top of the screen so you can go over those videos. I have my top 5 tips for in-season ways to get to the championship. I have my top 10 list as well, and then my mock draft. So really look at those videos as well in order to kind of get some strategy involved for your draft, for your in-season, free agencies and all that stuff, and also the mock draft. So if you'd like to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, you can follow us at the Gridiron Pod and on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening today. See you guys in the next episode. Take care.